The words old and useless hit me harder than any slap could. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of peaceful day I used to cherish. My son Daniel and his wife Claire had invited me over for lunch. They'd bought a big new house last year. 4 bedrooms, a massive kitchen, a garden that I had personally helped plant when they moved in. But as I sat there that afternoon, watching Claire roll her eyes every time I spoke, I felt like a guest who had overstayed his welcome in a home he helped build. I reached for the salt, my hands trembling slightly. Age has a way of doing that to you. Claire let out a sigh and muttered under her breath, "Can't even pass the salt without shaking." Honestly, it's pathetic. Daniel didn't say a word. He just kept cutting his steak. I looked at my son, hoping for some defense, some reminder that I had raised him better. But there was nothing, only silence. That's when Claire leaned back, folded her arms, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "You know, maybe it's time you stop visiting so much, Arthur. You had your life. Let us live ours. Daniel and I don't need extra baggage." The table fell silent. My fork dropped. "Extra baggage?" I repeated slowly. She smiled, a cold, practiced smile. "Yes, you're old, Arthur. You can't drive, can barely walk without help, and you sit around giving us advice like you're still in charge of anything. It's time you accepted that you're old and, well, useless." That word, useless, echoed in my chest like a gunshot. I didn't respond. I simply stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and said, "You're right, Claire. I'm old, but you'd be surprised what an old man like me can still do." Then I walked out. A week later, I stood outside that same house. Not as a guest, but as its owner. You see, when Daniel first moved out, he couldn't afford a mortgage. I didn't want my son and his wife struggling, so I'd bought the property in my name, letting them rent it for a small amount each month. It wasn't charity. It was love. They didn't know the deed still listed me as the legal owner. I had been paying property taxes, repairs, and insurance quietly, never mentioning it. I trusted that my family wouldn't make me regret it. But after that Sunday, I made a decision. I contacted my lawyer on Monday morning. By Wednesday, the eviction notice was ready. By Friday, the papers were delivered to the house. 3 days later, Daniel called me, furious. "Dad, what the hell is this? You're evicting us?" I stayed calm. "No, son. The owner of the house is reclaiming his property. It's nothing personal. Nothing personal. We have nowhere to go." "Funny," I said. "I thought I was the one who didn't belong there." He was silent for a moment, and then I heard Claire's voice shouting in the background, "He wouldn't dare." "He's bluffing." I sighed. "Tell Claire that this old and useless man just filed everything legally. You've got 30 days. Then I hung up, and I hung. For a few weeks, I didn't hear from them. I assumed they'd find another place. But on the 30th day, I saw their car pull into my driveway, packed with suitcases, boxes, and 2 very unhappy faces. Claire stepped out first. Her hair was messy, her eyes red. She looked nothing like the proud, smug woman I'd seen at that lunch. "Arthur," she began, her voice cracking, "please, we have nowhere to go. The rental we found fell through. We just need a little more time." Daniel stood behind her, looking ashamed. "Dad," he said quietly, "we're sorry. Claire shouldn't have said those things. We didn't mean to hurt you." I looked at both of them, the desperation, the regret. I could have taken pity on them. I could have let them move back in. But something inside me, something tired and long ignored, whispered no. I gestured toward the porch. "Come inside. We'll talk." They followed me into the same house where, months ago, I'd sat quietly while they mocked me. I made tea. Claire wouldn't meet my eyes. Daniel just kept wringing his hands. After a long silence, I said, "You know, I spent my whole life working, not for myself, but for family. Every brick I laid, every dollar I saved, was to make sure my son never had to struggle like I did. I wanted to be useful." Claire began to cry softly. I continued, "But you called me useless, Claire. You took the roof I gave you and used it to shelter your pride, not your gratitude. So, I'm afraid I can't help you anymore." She looked up, eyes wide. "You're throwing us out? Just like that?" "No," I said gently. "You threw me out the moment you said those words. I'm just accepting your invitation." I stood up and opened the front door. The message was clear. Daniel's face fell. He put an arm around his wife and slowly led her outside. Before he stepped off the porch, he turned back and said, "I'm sorry, Dad." Truly, I nodded. "I hope you've learned that respect is something you can't buy with a house, or replace once it's gone." They left without another word. That night, I sat in my chair, sipping tea and watching the rain hit the window. The house was quiet again, the kind of peaceful quiet that doesn't ache anymore. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel old or useless. I felt free. A few days later, I put the house up for sale. A young couple with a baby bought it. They reminded me of Daniel and Claire from years ago, back when they still had kindness in their eyes. When I handed over the keys, I smiled and said, "Take care of this place. It's more than bricks and walls. It's a test of how well you treat the ones who helped you build it." As they drove away, I stood there for a moment, breathing in the crisp morning air. Old? Maybe. Useless? Never. Because sometimes life gives you one final chance to prove that wisdom and kindness aren't weaknesses. They're the sharpest tools an old man can wield. And I use them well. Moral: never mistake kindness for weakness. The hands that built your comfort can just as easily take it away.